Welcome back to the Cash Practice Solution Podcast. In today's episode, we'll answer the question I think everyone really needs to have answered. Can you be wildly successful in a cash practice and still be a good person? Can you be ethically sound? Well, the simple answer is yes. The way to succeed and never surrender the high ground is simple. You want to balance patient outcomes, what's best for the patient, and your income, and never let them get out of balance. 30 years ago, I went to a really great seminar. There are lots of good things about it, but the best part was the keynote speaker. He was talking about a lot of things, but the practice management strategy that he came up with that was so good was powerful. And he said, if your service improves the patient's outcome, something that you're looking at, a new procedure, or hiring somebody who's maybe a mental health professional or whatever, if it improves the patient's outcome and doesn't negatively impact the practice income, it should be adopted. It should be kind of a no-brainer. So if it boosts income and actually makes that better, well, of course, you're going to want to adopt that even sooner. But this formula has been the guiding principle for lots of successful practices, and we have a bunch that we've really helped with this idea. You don't have to have a management degree. You don't have to be some kind of MBA genius to know that if the patient's outcomes are improved and your income isn't damaged by it, or better yet, improved, that's a really good idea. And by incrementally improving patient care, then what happens is that people start to talk about your practice because you get good outcomes. And then in the community where you're operating, you're going to find that you get better and better referrals. So as you update your business practices and your engagement strategies and your treatment modalities all come together and your outcomes continue to get better and better and better, so will your income, because outcomes will drive patients into your practice. You're going to have lots more patients who are satisfied and happy. And if your income is not negatively impacted, they'll just rise together. So real life examples about how the formula works. Our practice is pretty active. We move fast. And one time a patient said that when we did an IV setup, we did something that seemed kind of sloppy. The situation was disorganized. And this patient, as many of our patients are, is really good friends. So they were being very frank with me and said, this is really a problem. Somebody might think this is kind of not sterile or not good. And it turns out that our tech, who was absolutely brilliant, unflappable, amazing getting an IV stick, but he was an Army medic. So all the things that he learned like to apply in the battlefield. So it wasn't like a regular practice setting, but it was real easy to correct. So the patient told us, that's not so good. So listening to the patient and then modifying our approach, we responded by creating a standardized treatment tray, which is real simple, a little plastic tray that cost $1 maybe, and put all of our materials for the treatment into that tray, and then everything was packaged and put together, and the outcome was that the patient thought, they're really sharp, they've really got it together, no question. That patient, of course, later got my profuse thanks, and every time he gets an IV, he gets that great service. One of our patients is a doc. He's a doctor, and he commented that his stress level at work was just driving him crazy, and mostly it's the paperwork because of his electronic medical record. And he said, it's not an electronic medical record, it's a billing system. And the problem that he saw was it didn't maximize health outcomes. It maximized financial outcomes, which is income. So he basically said, and this was last week, I've known this principle for years, decades, outcome, income. He said last week, the outcome for the patient wasn't the focus of this thing that had happened in his big medical, he's a neurosurgeon, in his big medical group. And the thing it was focused on was the income, and it was creating a huge problem, not only because the patient's care was affected by it, but the doctor himself was not having a good time because he was focused on that instead of the patient care. He said the patient could come in on fire and leave on fire, and as long as the codes and checkboxes were done right, he'd pass right on through. As long as the billing was right, it was great. Didn't even have to put the blaze out. So the idea is the outcome has got to be primary and the income secondary, including with your technology. The most significant stress for this doctor was the disconnect between the outcome and the income. How do you think that relates to the patient's experience of the practice? when you have a baked-in problem with your system, whether it's your technology or your IV tray or whatever, you're going to have problems. This doctor had his priorities straight. And I think most of the providers that I work with, in fact, very few don't, they care about their patient first. They care about the patient's progress. He wanted to see evidence of the outcome in the documentation, and he wanted to spend his time on that. In our practice, we use a system that's focused on the patient's story, and we want to look at their health and quality of life, not just their billing. Billing's important, but it's secondary. In a cash practice, this is the greatest thing. This is the beauty of the whole thing. We call this the cash practice solution. It's really the you solution. You're the solution to the problem. And all you have to do is do what you know is best for the patient. Billing is simple. It doesn't have to be time consuming, and you can afford to focus on the patient's outcome. So on the flip side, lots of practices fall into the trap of focusing on income generation rather than patient outcomes, like that billing software. Private equity buyouts are notorious for this. So if you sell your practice to a private equity group, the costs to the system go up 20 to 30%. The care doesn't get any better. In fact, it gets worse and doctors hate it. Hospital employment, it can feel like that too. Everybody complains about the high-paid CEO and their high-flying salaries and all that, and the doctor's getting a quarter of that or less. The doctors who look into that are looking for security, which makes sense, and it's more predictable. But it's predictably going to be something that makes you unhappy. So independent practices that rely on third-party payment are going to be like that. They're going to be more complicated. You're going to have to be focused on the income because that's the struggle. With every year or every month, the complicated regulations keep piling up, and they're more and more and more. And the only people who can keep track of it, or the only practices, are corporations, because of the mountain of regulation. And they're the only ones who can succeed. So independent practices are dying, and it's not going to get better. The cash practice solution is a solution to that problem, and you're the one who's in charge. And the key to the independent practice growing is letting the patient outcomes guide your growth and go third-party free. Cash is the only sustainable way. So how do you measure outcomes? There's lots of quality measures and silly check boxes in all sorts of federal programs and other things, but they don't do any good. They don't help. They don't show any improvement in the patient's health. You just have more checked boxes. Outcomes should be measured in partnership with the patient, not by the arbitrary metrics of the insurance company or the government, because those sands are shifting constantly. One year it's one thing, it's accountable care. Next year, it's always something different. Superior outcomes are going to drive your referrals and the practice growth. That doc with the patient on fire, the reason I got to talk to him is because his wife brought him in as a patient, and she's been a patient for several years. Her outcome was so good that that doctor said, all right, I'll fold. I'm going to go in and see your doctor. When your outcomes are good, it's going to drive your income, and they'll be balanced if you follow this formula from the get-go. So at the very beginning, as you're strategizing to switch into cash practice, or you're trying to upgrade your cash practice to something that really works well, manage this first. Make sure your outcome and income are good. Don't be having a lot of loss leaders in your practice. That does not work. When you do this, it locks in continual revenue growth. You continue to do better and better, more and more profitable, and then the thing that you're most concerned about as a good practitioner ethically is your patient is getting the best care that's absolutely possible. And you're capable of doing this. And the future, it's pretty much written in stone at this point. If you stay in a third-party practice and you're an independent clinician, you're going to struggle. And it's just going to get worse. And the pay cuts will keep on coming. The government is not going to solve the problem, but you can. And the way that you can is by switching over to a third-party free practice. Call it DPC, call it what you like, but get the third party out of your life, and you will be a happy camper. So that wraps up today's discussion on outcomes and incomes. In our next episode, we're going to explore the importance of hospitality and customer service in creating a 5-star patient experience. So if you've ever felt stuck in a practice model that's holding you back, remember, there is a better way. So if you join us next time, we'll reveal some more simple steps that drive outstanding patient results and financial success. So if you want to maximize your current practice or start out on the right foot, check us out at cashpracticesolution.com. So thanks for tuning in to the Cash Practice Solution. I'm Dr. J, and I'm here to remind you that fulfilling cash practice is within reach. We can help you get there. So until next time, listen to your patients, learn their stories, and love them with all your heart, and you will be unstoppable.
Thanks for joining us. And if you have enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes packed with insights to help your cash-based practice thrive. And don't forget to check out all the tools and resources available at cashpracticesolution.com. They're free to you, and we're always adding more. Keep raising the bar in patient care. And we'll reconnect in the next episode with more ways to help you succeed.